So I got asked, I've got it written down here, have you made any business mistakes you regret? The answer to that is yeah, several, but there's one that really sticks out to me. And that is my stubbornness to ask for help. I'm an ultra competitive guy, and I, even through school, primary school, secondary school, college, university, while I started my first businesses, I started my first business when I was 13, had my second business by the time I was 16. I never once asked anyone that was in that position further ahead than me for help. Biggest mistake by a country mile. I was so stubborn to the point at which I would purposefully not ask for help so that I could actually prove to myself that I had the ability to do it on my own. Now all that did is literally hinder absolutely everything I did. I made every mistake you could possibly make. Yes, although it is good to make mistakes, if you can minimize them by about 80%, that's very helpful. Saves you a lot of money, and it bypasses. I probably didn't start seeking other people's advice until I was about 24, 25. And bearing in mind I'm 29 now, it's been 4 years, and my exponential growth in the last 4 years has been insane. I suddenly dropped the bravado and the ego that I had to do everything myself, and suddenly let it down. I suddenly realised. I'll tell you what it was actually. It was the first time I was in Stoke, and I was at the gym, and Eddie Hall walked in. And I'm a pretty strong guy, and I've been lifting for years, and I've always been naturally really strong. And I remember watching him squat, I think it was like 7.5 plates on the bar, like it was nothing. And I remember thinking, do you know what? I'm never ever going to get there. And it was a sad moment, and in my head all the time I'd always imagined myself being the best at everything that I was doing. And I always had this competitive nature in my head where I was like, I need to be number one, and anything less is failure or defeat. And it wasn't until I saw him that I realised that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't be number one anymore. So this whole, and what it did was it shook me up to the point at which I suddenly then had this sigh of relief that I don't always have to be number one. It's actually, and what that did is that dropped this competitive nature that I had to always try and strive to be number one, and allowed me to open up to actually start asking for help with things. I don't know why, it's a really weird shift in me. And all of a sudden I started saying, well, okay, I don't need this big competitiveness anymore. I don't have this big, the ego dropped, and all of a sudden I started asking people for help. So with business, I reached out to some online retailers, and they're making millions. I did tons of networking, and I started seeking their advice, and then all of a sudden I started implementing their advice. Wow, I jumped like 5 years worth of growth in about 6 months. Then I started getting to real estate, and the first thing I did was not actually dive into it and try and figure it out for myself. I actually went to seek advice from people that were multi-millionaires in property development and HMOs and buy-to-lets. Took their advice and then went to do it. And I must have bypassed so many mistakes, and all of a sudden, by now seeking out help and advice, I supersede pretty much everyone else that I'm competing against that's a similar level to me, just because I have mentors and I seek advice from people that are where I want to be, basically. And that's my biggest, to come back to the beginning again, my biggest mistake in business ever was being too stubborn and pig-headed and competitive to actually seek help and advice from people that were absolutely killing it in where I wanted to be. Now, had I done that from probably through school, I probably would have been so much further ahead. My grades were good, but I probably would have been top of my class or one of the best, and all of my business I would have been probably 10 years ahead, literally, had I been open enough to actually say that it's okay to ask other people for some help. So yeah, my biggest business mistake ever was having too much ego, and it was Eddie Hall that actually dropped my ego down enough to allow me to say it's okay and let people in, and that was actually the biggest turning point in my business career.